Hello and welcome to this very special broadcast on International Workers' Day. Others may call it May Day. I am Owen Kaura. And this broadcast is brought to you by ZTN in partnership with the Women's Coalition of Zimbabwe. Now, this program seeks to celebrate the achievements of trade unions, particularly here in Zimbabwe, looking at the labor laws, including the Labor Act. For example, looking at maternity leave, the legal age of majority, for example, rights for women to go to work and directly earn as well. And the Constitution in itself, what does it say? Equal rights for women, equal play. And furthermore, this program also aims to push advocacy for enactment and implementation of laws which promote empowerment and protection from abuse and exploitation. Now, of course, for such a program, we would need an esteemed panel, and I'm very delighted to be joined by a lady and a gentleman who I'll ask to quickly introduce themselves, and I'll start, of course, with the lady.
Thank you, Owen. Good afternoon. My name is Mchanyara Cynthia Mkamuri. I'm the General Secretary for Young Women Christian Association, also known as YWCA, that works with Women's Coalition of Zimbabwe, where I lead the economic empowerment cluster. So in short, that's who I am.
Well, thanks very much, and thank you very much for joining us on this very special day, Workers' Day. And of course, we wouldn't be able to do without the policymakers themselves, the government, and from the ministry, we have another gentleman. I'll ask you to introduce yourself, sir.
Thank you, Owen. My name is Mr. Langton Gorima. I'm the Acting Director for Labor Administration in the Ministry of Public Service, Labor and Social Welfare.
So there you have it. It looks like it's going to be a great discussion as we celebrate workers, of course. And I'll just like to start from a very, very simple place. And I'll start with you, Langton. What is Workers' Day?
Thank you. Workers' Day basically is a day that is recognized the world over, in which we celebrate and commemorate the contribution of workers in our society. It has its roots to the agitation that started in the 1900s when workers were advocating for better working conditions, particularly shorter working hours. And over the years, with the developments that have happened, the industrial revolution, there were a lot of changes that were necessary to ensure that development also comes with a human face. And it has gained momentum, and it's now recognized in some jurisdictions as Labor Day, in some as Workers' Day. And for Zimbabwe, it's very significant because if you look at the way work was introduced in Zimbabwe, at the onset of the colonial establishment, work was very alien to the people of Zimbabwe, and there were measures that were put in place to force people to work, and we had Chibaro, and we also had a repressive legislation that forced people to work, and that defined the working relationship along racial lines. You had the Masters and Servants Act, and we go down the memory lane also, the coming in of independence and progressive legislations that sought to undo what had been established by the colonial regime over up to today. So we have a history to celebrate and recognize and even just say thank you to the workers for contributing to the development of our society.
Now, Mchanyara, Langton has just highlighted and chronicled the journey and really zeroed in on Zimbabwe as well. But then I'd like to zero in on your constituency, women, young women in particular. What does this day mean for them?
This day for young women or women in general simply is a day of introspection, a day of reflection of what's happening in the labor market for women and girls. What it means actually, it is also a day where we celebrate the gains, but we still have a lot of work to do so that at least towards perhaps Vision 2030, we may at that point be recognized as equal citizens to men as well. Because the history that was chronicled simply did not include women in the picture, because women were treated kind of like second-class citizens, where their wages were lower than those of their male counterparts. So it's a journey that has been celebrated. But where we are right now, because of unemployment in Zimbabwe, we find that women and girls bear the brunt in the field of work and even at the university or in the education sector as well. We find that women continue to raise alarm, women continue to raise concerns on what happens in their areas of work and even in the education sector. So it's also a day where we really need to push advocacy in terms of equal work distribution, and even going back to the community where we talk about unpaid care and domestic work as well. We really want that recognized so that at least it can be redistributed, or to influence policy so that at least it becomes recognized and budgeted for as well.
You bring in very interesting points, but Langton, Zimbabweans, well, some critics say Zimbabweans are well known for indabas and being able to talk so much. Let's just go on the ground and maybe look at what some of the issues that she has raised in terms of women and labor rights. Have there been any tangible results in that area?
Thank you. I think one remarkable departure was the promulgation of the Labour Act, which sought to repeal the Master and Servants Act that was there. That act did not recognize that there was an employment relationship, and as such, the colonial administration also regarded women as second-class citizens, as you want to say. But most importantly, we have, as a government, ratified international treaties, ILO Convention 100 and Convention 111, respectively, that relate to equal remuneration, and then 111 on non-discrimination. And these have been domesticated in our legislation. We have provisions that are there that penalize discrimination on the basis of gender, and we also have in our legislation the fact that there must be equality in terms of remuneration, and that cascades to sector-specific legislation where you have this principle being also enshrined in the collective bargaining agreements. And the collective bargaining agreements in terms must also be aligned to our principle legislation, which advocates for equality. But most importantly, we had ratified Convention 45 on underground work, which prohibited women to work underground. But we realized that with the drive towards equality, it would be unfair for us to deny young women who are engineers now and miners to go underground. So we have denounced that, because we have ratified other more focused conventions that allow us to put safety and health provisions in mind so that women can work. But again, we are now in the process of amending the labor legislation, the Labor Act, to provide for more concrete provisions that mainstream the principle of equal pay for work of equal value, because prior to that it wasn't very clear. But now we are saying the concept of equal pay for work of equal value goes beyond having similar pay grades for the same jobs, but goes on to then analyze jobs to say we do not have to downplay jobs that are traditionally for women, but we have to analyze their value so that even if it's different from another job performed by men, we look at the value. And most importantly also, we have put in the bill that is before Parliament provisions that now seek to plug the lacuna that was there in the legislation with respect to violence and harassment at the workplace, in line with ILO Convention 190 on sexual harassment, on harassment and violence. And I think these are progressive legislative frameworks that are there. But most importantly, on the ground, as you are saying, we have taken a deliberate step to orient our labor inspectors, who are the enforcers of the legal provisions, to have a labor inspection that looks at work from a gender perspective, to ensure that they protect the workers at the workplace and educate, because we provide technical assistance to the employers and the workers on the ground with regards to minimum conditions and fundamental rights. And we believe the issue of treating women equally is a fundamental right that must be respected.
Now, Langton has brought in other points as well, looking at the legislation that's currently there, the bill that's there. Now, coming to you, Muchanyara, let's look at the issues of sexual harassment at the workplace and the legislation in itself. Are there any shortcomings there? And if there are, kindly explain, and what can be done?
Okay, I think for starters, if you look at the Labour Act, it looks like it's silent about harassment, sexual harassment in the workplace. There's no law explicitly that talks of sexual harassment or what can be done in the case of the perpetrators doing that. So that's also a shortcoming. And then if you look at it again in the labor market, a young man and a young woman looking for employment, there are certain questions that a young man may not be asked, which then denotes to segregation or discrimination. For instance, do you have children? Do you want to have children? Or things like that, which then determines that perhaps these people don't want somebody who is productive. That alone is also discriminatory. And furthermore, in the workplaces, we often see that there's sexual harassment, some which goes unreported, because it's a case where perhaps a young woman who's married has been sexually abused in its various forms, but going back home to report that kind of abuse may also result in marriage breakdown, or sometimes people can even label her. So it's something that we really need to ensure that there are laws which are enacted to protect women and girls at the workplaces, something which we see being absent at the moment. And then even in the education sector as well, there were reports by lecturers abusing the girl child in the tertiary institutions. You find that if you complain or raise it, it then determines your grade or even a repeat at some point. So it's never, we celebrate the gains, yes, we admit, but there is still a lot that needs to be done. And even if we talk about the Constitution of Zimbabwe, that talks about equality, together with what Langton talked about, the ratified conventions and treaties that supports equality, we still find that on the ground, these things remain policies, but they lack implementation, they also lack monitoring, and at some point they also lack even the budgetary support, the provisions to ensure that it takes place. We don't see it. Equality is on the policy, but not really on the ground. If you want to look at it, check on positions of power that are held by men versus women in Zimbabwe. If we look at the just ended by-elections, there were 118 contestants, and of these, 106 were men, and then 12 only for women and girls. What does this mean then? It also means that there are so many bottlenecks along the way that hinder women and girls from reaching their full potential. So there's still a lot that needs to be done, especially at workplaces. How we wish the Ministry of Labour to really enforce all institutions to enact policies that protect women and girls from harassment at the workplaces and in the education sector. And also what needs to be done once there is a perpetrator who has, beyond reasonable doubt, been seen to be perpetrating on the girls and the women. So it's a long haul.
And some of those issues that you raised there, as we round off the program, of course, Langton, maybe you would like to respond to some of those issues.
Most definitely. I think we will certainly engage Women's Coalition. I think we have left them behind a little bit, and now the government is on a drive for leaving no one behind. We would want to update them on what's happening. Like I indicated, we recognize there was a lacuna in the legislation to provide clear-cut, concrete provisions to combat harassment, but we are quite sure we took the main principles in the ILO Convention 190, and they are there, and we'll be able to engage them so that we can propound what is there. But over and above that, government has also taken a lead. The Public Service Commission has now come up with a policy on sexual harassment, and we have instructed all national employment councils to then develop sector-specific policies that also align themselves with that. But most importantly, should be happy to know that we are revising the Labour Amendment Act, and we are also cleaning up the provisions on maternity, because the current legislation has got qualifying provisions that one has to qualify maybe work for a year for them to enjoy maternity provision, and we are scrapping that. And we're also scrapping provisions that more or less look like they were providing family planning for women by regulating how many intervals a woman would have children. And we are doing away with that. We are saying women must enjoy full maternity protection. And over and above that, we are also going to develop a maternity scheme under the Social Security so that the burden of maternity does not lie on the employer, who can, in a discrete way, discriminate against women, but having a national scheme that is there where the employers can draw the particular benefit so that we then close all the loopholes. But most importantly, I think we need to go on an awareness campaign to ensure that people are aware of these legislative provisions that are there so that we can also arm them to protect themselves. I would have wanted to provide more on the
Yes,
particular,
of course.
but I'm sure we're short of time.
And on that note, with your response, I think we've come to the end of this program. A very special edition, making the law work for women in the workplace. And of course, it's International Workers' Day. Some call it May Day, some call it Labor Day. But many thanks to my guests for joining me on this very special edition. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And of course, thank you for watching. Let's continue the conversation on our social media platforms. For ZTN, I'm Owen Kaura.